For the next 30 minutes, we're breaking down these numbers and focusing on the conversation about race relations in America. CBS News Elections Director Anthony Salvanto will dive into these numbers. Also with us, Harvard University professor and author of The Condemnation of Blackness, Khalil Muhammad, and founder of Swagger.nyc, Sian-Pierre Regis. And in Cleveland, CBS News Justice and Homeland Security correspondent Jeff Pegues. Jeff is currently working on a book due out next year titled Black and Blue: Aggressive Policing, Racial Tension, and the Crisis in American Law Enforcement. All right, Anthony, let's start with you. Right now, 69% of Americans say race relations in the U.S. are bad. So are there any glimmers of optimism in the numbers?
There are some. But what's interesting, Elaine, is when you look inside those numbers, you see that whites and blacks now agree in almost equal numbers that race relations are bad. And historically, that is notable because we have often found in the polls that African Americans were more likely to say that things were bad, while white Americans were more likely to say that things were good. And now the numbers who say that things are bad has increased among white Americans, so those two numbers are really comparable.
So what kind of an impact have the recent tragedies had?
Quite a bit. And one way that you measure that is in the direction that people think things are going. Not just the state of things, which, as we said, things are bad, but they think that things are getting worse. And that can be troubling to a lot of folks because it's not just that state of play isn't so good, but that if things are getting worse, that is then harder to turn things around. Having said that, you asked a little bit about optimism. There is one thing in here, and that is that while more folks say that they think that the Black Lives Matter movement has some points to make, that they agree, at least in principle, with some of their points, they also feel that their local police are keeping them safe, and they express confidence in their local police. So as far as the start of a dialogue is concerned, you have you have the backing for the police, for their local police. You have some agreement with what Black Lives Matter is saying, and so together that may be the start of some constructive dialogue, at least in acknowledging each side.
So polls are always a snapshot in time. How does this particular moment compare to other moments in time that we've seen in history?
You know, as you noted in the intro, we are seeing now a high point in the number who say that things were bad. And that's a sharp decline from that optimism that you had right in early 2009 when we found the highest number. That decline is notable not just for the difference, but for the expectations gap, that people thought things were going to get better and they haven't. In many ways, the election of President Obama kind of signaled for a lot of folks in the polls, not just that race relations could get better, but that it symbolized an ideal, right? That what Americans sort of go for, which is that race doesn't matter. You can be anything you want. You can do anything you want. Race ought not matter. So the disappointment gap there is notable. But then you go back all the way to '92, where you had the Rodney King riots in LA. That was the previous, low point in all of this. And the other thing to remember about the polls, whenever you look at this, is that they often take these snapshots right after tragic events. And so you don't want to look only at snapshots then, because that's when people are reacting and feeling really bad. You want to look at that whole historic trend line, which kind of goes up and down depending on the way people are feeling at the time, not just after tragedies.
Sian-Pierre, I couldn't help but notice, so you were nodding as Anthony was talking about that time period immediately after President Obama was elected. People have thrown around that term post-racial society. Why is it that you were nodding your head, and what do you see in these numbers?
Well, I just remember how I felt as a black man, electing President Obama in 2008. I mean, I just remember feeling like this is it. This is the moment where we don't need to have this conversation anymore. The most powerful man in the land, in the world, is a black man. If he can do it, anybody can do it. But that was it almost seemed now, at this point, like a facade, right? Like a mirage. When you see what's happening on the streets today, and what I've seen happening on the streets for the last 2 years, especially through my Facebook feed, it was slowly, eating at that mirage that I had in my head that everybody now could be equal. And that post-racial word was so special for young people, right? I threw it out all the time. I don't see race. I don't believe in race. But as I grow older, I realize, oh my gosh, this isn't going anywhere. There may not, we may never get to a time where there is true equality for the black man or for the person of color. And that is now, at 31, a really scary and saddening thought for me.
Professor Muhammad, what is your take on these numbers? Do these numbers surprise you at all?
I think that they confirm what many of us are feeling in our households, in the difficult conversations that we're having at work, in our sites of leisure, which is that we've got a lot of work to do. And the significance of singular success, in this case embodied in what Sean has described in the election of the first African-American president, really shows the limits of doing the hard work of making sure that our institutions are on the same page as our hearts often are. People want to do the right thing in many instances, but our institutions have not caught up with that kind of aspiration. This president in particular, to Sean's sense of optimism, played to our best selves. He wanted to bind us together in a kind of, we can now move forward in ways that have been difficult prior to this moment in 2009, and that's reflected in these polls. But just as Rodney King's beating and the subsequent acquittal of those officers in that case showed the level of low in race relations that we've now essentially matched, here we are yet again with the criminal justice system at the heart of a conversation about the quality of democracy and the quality of freedom in this country. And that, to me, shows through very clearly in these numbers.